All right, welcome in to the Built on Air podcast. This is a big one. So today is August 4th, 2026, and myself, Ali, and Camille are here to talk about some breaking news this morning. I am grateful that they announced this on a Tuesday morning and not a Wednesday morning, so we could talk about it today. It was funny. I was telling Ali and Camille last night, I went to bed kind of worried about like today's episode of like if we'll have enough content to talk about, and Airtable came through this morning. So if you have not heard, Airtable is being acquired by a company I had never heard of before this morning. So Bending Spoons is the company, and we're going to talk a lot about it today. So initial reaction when you heard that this morning?
Shock. I think I was one of the many people who thought Airtable was positioning themselves to go public, which this is the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Yep. Definitely shocked. Yeah. Shocked and a little bit like, what's going to happen next? So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah, that was mine. Like, holy cow, like, what does that mean for everything, you know? I'm sure everybody, part of me is like, man, I can't imagine what employees are thinking. Like, I was discussing with Airtable employees yesterday. I'm guessing they had no idea, you know, that the regular employee. And so I'm sure today the offices are abuzz and the internal chats are abuzz at Airtable discussing this. So let's talk through the terms first. So let me see if, let's go over here and go here. Okay, so let's, okay, so we'll go here. So here's the announcement. So the announcement came from Bending Spoons. I actually went to, if you go to Airtable newsroom, I was like, oh, what did Airtable say about it? Nothing. It is not in their newsroom yet.
Right.
So this came from Bending Spoons. Official announcement that they're announcing it, and they do announce terms. So 1.285 billion together. So that's the value of the company. And Airtable was profitable and already had a lot of cash on the books. And so with their cash, they're valuing it at 2.25 billion. Now that's interesting because it was publicly reported the last fundraise they did, I believe, was worth 10 billion. And
11.
at one point, it was worth 11.8 billion.
Right before that, yeah.
Before that, yeah. So, but this was back in 22, maybe. Yeah, I don't think they've raised since then. So huge carve down from you know almost $12 billion down to 2 billion.
I think that's kind of in line with some other companies though that saw a boom from like the COVID era where everyone needed to pivot to doing more things digitally, and you know Airtable is pretty good at letting you do some stuff digitally. So I think some of that might be why, not necessarily all related to people's faith in Airtable, but yeah, it is a stark difference.
Yeah. So, and they even give numbers. So 20% year over year growth, 480 million as of June. So, you know, 480 million. So that's what, little two and a half around there. If you get to the 1.2 valuation. So that's pretty low for a SaaS company. There's a industry-wide, you know, crunch of SaaS companies with AI. And so we're seeing a heavy reduction in multiples. SaaS always used to get the highest multiple possible on exits, and that story is changing. And this is definitely a data point in that story changing. So pretty crazy. So Bending Spoon, who are they? So they are an Italian company. They just went public about a month ago. And so this is their first acquisition after being a publicly traded company. Some of their biggest ones, they own AOL. So they basically acquire software entities and then they bring them in-house. And we'll be talking about, what their model looks like here in a second. But so anyways, they have a portfolio of companies that we'll go through and kind of look at what there is. So if you're wondering what's going to happen to Airtable, stick around. We'll go through their track record of how they have operated in the past. But first, let's look at a couple other initial reactions on Twitter. I've seen mixed, so I've kind of been going through the Twitterverse and what people are saying. Some people are basically saying, this Bending Spoon has a reputation of just gutting companies and just completely decimating them, and then also jacking up prices. We'll get into specifics, but that's one view. Other views are they actually help companies. And they actually, invest in them when companies previously hadn't been investing in the product. And so you'll get a mixed reaction. So take everything with a grain of salt. So this is basically saying, if you were an equity holder in Airtable, it's not looking good for you at the valuation that they got, for employees, because they'd raised more money than the 1.125 they sold the value of the company for. So they're basically paying back the money, although the cash also helps with that as well. So there is some money to go to early employees, but probably not a ton for employees that weren't there from the beginning. I don't know what this one means.
Me either.
Anyways, I think that's just AI generated. Okay, so let's go through. So what I did was I asked HyperAgent, and we'll talk about HyperAgent, what that means. I asked HyperAgent to do a deep dive on what this acquisition means and the track record for Bending Spoons and get some insights. So I'm going to share the report that HyperAgent created. I'll share this link with people so you can review this. And the big thing that it highlights is, and it's interesting, and this report calls it out, nobody is reporting on the fact that as part of the filing that they did with the 6K, the government tax filing with the SEC, they intentionally carve out HyperAgent. And so HyperAgent got moved into a separate company called HyperAgent Inc. And so HyperAgent is not part of this acquisition. So HyperAgent is going to be a standalone product. My guess is that's where Howie, the CEO of Airtable, is going to move. He is the original developer of HyperAgent. And so my guess is he's going to continue with that and likely won't be part of Airtable going forward after the acquisition rolls out. So that's an interesting carve out. It's interesting. SuperAgent. So you have HyperAgent and SuperAgent. SuperAgent, I think, is part of this. They never officially closed it, although that was the word it was closing. So maybe Bending Spoons will do something with SuperAgent, HyperAgent. So it highlights that. Yeah. Okay. So who is Bending Spoon? I'm gonna move this over here so you can see you guys. So Milan based, so in Italy. So they're valued at 18 billion. Okay, so they're listed on the NASDAQ, so they're US listed, even though it's a European company. And there's some revenue numbers on them. And so, yeah. So basically, here's their list of companies that they've acquired. So Evernote was that their first one? Where is AOL? Okay, AOL was just this year. I didn't realize that. Okay, so they started with Evernote in 2023. If you remember Evernote, there's actually some overlap between Evernote and Airtable. Camille was saying she was a heavy Evernote user back in the day.
When I was a youth.
Yep. But yeah, it talks about, what they did. So they basically, they reduced the free tier, although they kept a free tier, but they drastically reduced how much you could do. And then they raised prices. And Evernote was kind of a dying company. I think I'd been to their offices in the Bay Area many years ago. And at one point, they were kind of the darling of Silicon Valley. But then they kind of died down. And so they got acquired. But anyways, they're still around. So Evernote is still a product that's there. Okay, here's one that hits close to home, StreamYard. I didn't realize that this company had acquired StreamYard. We were running our this podcast on StreamYard for many years. And then just this year, a couple of months ago, I started getting emails from them saying that that they were raising the prices on us and significantly. And I didn't realize that it was this spoon company doing it. So anyways, we moved. It was enough of a price increase that I moved for an alternative. So we're now on an alternative platform. And so that was what was behind StreamYard. They were adding features to it. So from that perspective, I saw it moving in a good direction, but it looks like they were getting pretty hit on reviews, billing trust damage. Yep, that's what I saw. Co-founders left within a month of the deal. So that's one. Meetup is one you probably recognize. So that's an early internet entity. So 2024, they got acquired. And it looks like they invested in the product and are adding to it. So all of these you might recognize. WeTransfer, I never really used it, but was aware of it. This is one they say they've shipped 100 plus improvements to it since acquiring it. And so there's one. They did jack up the prices as well. Issue, I remember that. Kind of a small one. Bright Cove. It's more like an infrastructure play for video. Never heard of Komoot. Harvest. This is one I've used Harvest before. I didn't realize that one got acquired as well. Vimeo. You probably heard of Vimeo. Video hosting. So no confirmed changes. So that's interesting. So they haven't announced any significant changes. So they didn't actually merge it. So operating separately. That's interesting. Because I wonder if that one was more profitable. AOL. Can't believe AOL still exists. Eventbrite. There's another one you've likely heard of.
Yeah, I think I've heard about half of these, and some just
Yeah, Attractive. I'm not familiar with that. It's a hardware deal. So yeah, interesting. But yeah, so there definitely is like a track record of going in and gutting. But the big difference is the ones that they did that with, I think were not profitable, dying companies that they've gone in and had to gut. So it will be interesting, their response to Airtable that is profitable, is growing, has, you know, cash on the books to leverage. And so they may take a different approach. That is good to see that at least some companies, they haven't done any changes. So Vimeo was, you know, not that long ago, 8+ months. So maybe it's about to be announced. So yeah, so I think, so here we go. So here's kind of the thing that's interesting. So April of next year is when it will officially close, right? So the announcement today does not mean that it's officially closed. It takes time to do all the paperwork and everything. So there's still, you know, 6 months before this is a done deal, which means the next 6 months, nothing is going to drastically change. Now, what might change is the current, you know, Airtable strategy. They might freeze development, features, things like that, you know. We might see some of that. And then, you know, what to expect after that, transition and first cuts. It's very likely that leadership, you know, there's going to be a lot of overlap between Bending Spoons and Airtable at the top level of leadership. And so you'll likely see some cuts there. You know, this is predicting support and degradation of customer support, which will not be good because I think a lot of people were already complaining about a lack of customer support. And then comes the pricing and tier restructuring, and then reinvestment becomes visible. So I think there's some good and some bad to take away from this. I'm kind of taking an equal, stable approach of like optimistic that maybe in the long run there will be some improvements, but definitely in the short run, this is a shock to the entire ecosystem of what it means. The big thing for me is like the strategy that Bending Spoons is going to take with Airtable. I think Airtable, we've been around the evolution of it being like self-serve, not an enterprise tool, but then they started to get traction in the enterprise, and then they decided to kind of not go all in. They always had their non-enterprise offerings, but really focus their strategy and attention on enterprise. Now with Bending Spoons, they do not, from my perspective, have an enterprise software offering currently, which means they do not have that expertise in-house to be a true, you know, enterprise sales SaaS solution. So they might look at this and say, what if we take Airtable back to its roots and like go down market and be more mid-market where, you know, Vimeo, Harvest, StreamYard, Evernote, you know, I'd say Vimeo, I'm sure has an enterprise offering, you know, Eventbrite, but I would still put these in kind of the mid-market space. So that to me is the decision of where they take it.
The one of these, if you just scroll up a little bit, Dan, I've forgotten the name because it's not a platform I used. Actually, my bad. Scroll down. Is it Komoot? I looked that one up, and it's like find the best trails and adventure paths near you.
Yeah,
That's not going to be an
GPS.
enterprise platform. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you could repurpose some of the internal technology and stuff. You could always do that. That's sometimes why acquisitions happen, not for the company itself, but like if you take this idea and repurpose it elsewhere, kind of deal. I think Airtable has done that with some of its acquisitions. But yeah, I kind of agree that none of these really read enterprise app building, improve your workflow kind of deal. Maybe Evernote. But the other ones they don't seem to have a one thing holding them all together as like a theme, at least to me.
Yeah. I mean, Eventbrite is nowhere in that space. Yeah. And, so here it's interesting because this one, they maybe went up market. They eliminated their free tier. Yeah. So, and StreamYard, from my experience, they're moving more up tier as well. But not enterprise. I mean, StreamYard is not an enterprise product by any means. So I think that's the big question for me is where do they take it? Yeah. And then here's an analysis of, highest risk is free plan, lower tier, lower risk at enterprise and business. If they increase prices. Okay, so I had to do an analysis. What's the negative outlook and what's the positive outlook? So pattern is 9 for 9 on cost extraction. Institutional knowledge is the thing that actually gets destroyed. That's what's interesting is like I look at Airtable and these other products, like Airtable, the complexity of the product is so high. All that knowledge, like the engineers that have been with Airtable from the beginning are likely not going to be around. And so,
yeah, because any qualified engineer is going to be able to jump in and read the code of Airtable and get what it does. But what you're losing is, why did we build it this way? Because when you come into something fresh, into something that already exists, a lot of times I tend to be like, it's gonna be efficient. We're gonna follow best practices. We're gonna go nuts. And then you kind of read the current state of things and you're like, well, if I change this, I'm gonna have to overhaul this over here. And then that might affect our business users. So we can't just do that without, launch comms and all those things. And so it kind of snowballs. And so institutional knowledge is really important for, an app of this size, because I'm sure there's quite a bit of that within Airtable. Like I recently complained to Airtable about, here's all of these weird inconsistencies in the product of this is a feature, but not here, but it is here. And I'm thinking of a lot of things like that. If there might be a very good reason why the feature isn't where I expect it to be, but somebody's got to know that before they, accidentally make some adjustments that have some downstream impacts.
Yeah. Yeah. The part that scares me is that transition. If you have, an enterprise account rep, getting that knowledge transferred to a new team, there's going to be some major speed bumps. Stability of the platform really concerns me during this transition, because I truly believe that behind the scenes at Airtable, there's a few people like putting duct tape in places to keep it afloat on a daily basis, and those people putting duct tape, if they leave, there's going to be some outages and slow response rates that concerns me. So that's where my big fear is for the immediate transition period.
Even the little stuff. I've talked to some Airtable employees that didn't know what the universe was. So it's like it's on the website. It's not, I didn't make it up. It is a feature of Airtable, but it's so low key. It's not really advertised anymore. It used to be advertised all the time in the early days, but not so much anymore. And like when you're onboarded as a new Airtable employee, they're probably focusing on the big stuff nowadays. Here's what an automation is. Here's interfaces. Here's Omni. No one's talking about the universe. So how many of these little pieces of Airtable are going to become even more stale than they might already be?
Yeah. So the roadmap, This one doesn't concern me as much. I actually almost view this as a positive that HyperAgent is not part of this deal, because I think a lot of people were looking at HyperAgent as like, hey, focus on the core product, like get that improved first. And we all saw, the focus moving to HyperAgent, and I think a lot of people that prefer, use the core Airtable didn't like that. So this might be a positive that somebody comes in and says, we're just going to focus on this core platform and make it better at what it does. That actually could be a positive in my book. This is another one. This is interesting, where it's like Airtable had almost $1 billion of cash on the books that it could use to reinvest into the product. Now Bending Spoon gets access to that $1 billion. They've got $5 billion in debt that they've got to service. Now that $1 billion of cash can get used elsewhere, and not back into Airtable. So that's definitely a negative. And just the overall attention that Airtable is going to get of, now it's one of 10 portfolio companies, and they're not going to stop after Airtable. They could be announcing acquisitions, every month. And I can't imagine how hard it would be to digest all these companies and get them stable after a transition like this.
Yeah, when was the most recent acquisition?
May of this year, Tractive, I think.
Okay. I have no idea how long it takes to do any of this transition work, but I assume you would want to focus on one transition at a time. And if this deal wouldn't go through until, I think you said April of next year,
February.
that's like, that should be some good buffer between May of this year and February of next year to sort of, okay, well, now we're focusing on onboarding Airtable as part of our suite of products.
Yeah. So that's the negative. Obviously, we've kind of highlighted those. Those are the obvious ones that come to mind. Let's maybe take a positive spin. What could be the positive case for this? So nothing has been shut down since the company started. The company's only been around for 4-ish years, but they do invest in the companies that they've acquired. This is kind of interesting. Airtable was in a difficult position. I think they recognize, I think all of us thought that an IPO was in the works. That's where, 2 years ago they were getting ready to IPO. And then, the market shifted. So what I thought was interesting is, I had the thought this morning of like, okay, I'd never heard of this Bending Spoon before. Now I do know a little bit about them. Is this better than had Salesforce acquired Airtable? Because that, a lot of people were predicting Salesforce was an investor in Airtable, so they already had an inside seat. What would that have looked like versus this Bending Spoon?
Salesforce, I think that would have been interesting because Salesforce has a very formal like developer pathway. There's like licenses that you can get for, like, I am a certified Salesforce consultant or developer or whatever you want to call it. They're massive. They're a global company with a lot of different use cases that they have. And so Airtable being absorbed by them, I think would probably look different, but I also don't know. I have no idea where that would have led, but I think it is like an interesting comparison that someone much more knowledgeable than I can articulate why something like this acquisition, which seems to be a portfolio of more consumer-facing applications versus Salesforce, which is explicitly enterprise. If I'm not mistaken, I feel like you're a small company, you have no need for Salesforce at all. I could be wrong, but I feel like they're much more enterprise than what it looks like Bending Spoons is about.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You would have known the strategy with Salesforce. It would definitely be going upstream even more so. Or, do they kill it off completely? Because that's the thing is like, there's companies that would have acquired Airtable and completely killed it, within 2 years of mishandling it. So there is hope that this may have extended the life of Airtable. So that's the pro case for it. And so they do have a record of reinvestment into the product. And some products have maintained high customer review rating. If you're an enterprise customer, you're likely okay for the time being. It does show flexibility, so they may not use the same playbook with every acquisition. And now Airtable essentially is part of a publicly traded company. So they are now publicly traded, which means they have an obligation to their public investors. I'll have to look at the stock price and see if it's something that I personally would invest in. I don't know. I'll have to look at it.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
Yeah. I think I saw a tweet that like Insider, there was a huge jump last week on the stock, and they're like, okay, Insiders got wind of this happening a week ago. So, all right,
They've become public, just not in the way that I was expecting.
Yeah.
So I remember our sandwich bet days, and I wonder who would get the sandwich in this example.
Yeah, very true. Okay, real quick on Reddit, it was posted as always. Most people. So here's the real question: that if you're a heavy Airtable user and this news concerns you, where do you go? Like that's always been the question that we've had. Is like, I don't believe there are like direct competitors to like easily move off. There's a couple mentioned in this thread, Fibery, which I actually looked. They've evolved. I remember looking at them years ago and then had kind of forgot about them, but they're still around. Or maybe, I think I saw them.
I spent a month at this point over a year ago trying to line up what are the alternatives to Airtable, and what I've generally come to the conclusion of is Airtable has done a good job of spreading itself so that it's a database, it has an automation layer, it's the user interface as well. And a lot of the alternatives are very good at one or maybe two of those things, but not so good at all three.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what you're after, you might not need all three, but you probably want all three because you're used to all three.
Yeah.
And when I was evaluating, I have a business and I was like, what do I run my business on? And I started to lean more towards the open source alternatives, which made it so, based on the ones that I was looking at, I would have to do, okay, automations I'm outsourcing. Instead of using the inbuilt automation layer, I would use a separate dedicated automation tool, and then have the open source alternative be my back of the house database, which is fine for a lot of people, but you lose it's a blessing and a curse, because the curse of SaaS in general is that you don't own your business logic and it's really hard to extract. Now, as of a week and a half ago, now you can extract what your automations do relatively easily. But before then, for years, God help you if you needed to explain to an external developer, I have 10 automations that are daisy chained together. You get that with SaaS. And so having a dedicated a tool for that, that could be better overall, depending on what your use case is. But yeah, I think what a lot of people are probably getting at when they're talking about the alternative skier is that I can't just give you one tool to replace what you're using. I need to know what you're using it for. I saw someone suggest ClickUp, which is more for like task management, project management. I've used ClickUp. I kind of liked ClickUp. I think I was early in the game with their user interface. It was a little, it could use some polish, but this was 2 years ago. I'm sure it's perfectly fine now, but you're not going to use ClickUp, I don't think, to run like a store, for example, inventory. You're going to use it for project management. So when you're asking, either in this thread or any other thread, I need an alternative, lead with what you're doing. And that'll help people be like, oh, I've used such and such for that, and it was great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, I actually still use ClickUp in some use cases. Our agency runs on ClickUp for our task management, but we still leverage Airtable on top of it. They're very different use cases. Where I don't see a direct alternative is like your operational backbone system of a multi-department environment, like you could piecemeal it with different things, but Airtable's power was like tailoring a solution to how you wanted your operations to run and getting multiple departments to have their own environment that could then sync data where relevant. I think the alternative, and this is where I personally am going, although I don't know that others are, is like I'm now building my own software, with vibe coding and AI. It's so much easier to build your own stuff and host it yourself. But I'm also, more developer. I don't know that most companies will move that direction, but I think, these lovables and bolts, if maybe it's like a Zeit where, you're building your entire workflow vibe coded on a platform like that. Maybe that's the real alternative.
I was going to say Softers, but I would probably try their database out. I've heard really good things, and I think if they haven't already increased their record limit, they're about to be increasing it to like 1 million records or something like that. I'm not fully up to date on their current limits, but
and
impressive.
If we're worried about potential price increases for Airtable, and to be clear, none of the press releases have said that is an intention, and they of course wouldn't say that until the deal actually goes through anyway. But if price goes up, as it did with Evernote, another one of those acquisitions, you also kind of consider, when you're looking at alternatives, if you're splitting what one app did for you into several different apps, well, then look at the price of all of those apps together. And if you're developing it yourself, remember that you cost money. So how much of your time is being spent building those tools? And depending on what your skill set is and the tools that you have available to you, you might be able to build something better than what Airtable would let you do, because Airtable has some rigid restrictions sometimes. So I'm talking in circles of like, there is no one answer for everybody. Some people are going to be better off with Lovable or Zeit or one of those. Some people are going to be better off using something like ClickUp, and some people are going to be better off using just a basket of SaaS. And the things you have to consider for yourself: what am I using it for? How mad at me is my team going to be if we have to transition? Sometimes you got to play that game. And what's my budget? Those are the 3 questions I think everyone should kind of ask themselves closer to February. Think about it now, but definitely have a good thought about it before February.
Yeah, for sure. So we have a couple of comments from people watching. So build for Airtable. So there is some hope. That's good to hear. Okay, so Lorraine uses Bright Cove, and they've seen the quality get better since it's got acquired, including their customer service. So she's hopeful.
No,
so
that's the one. I complain about Airtable all the time here. And one of the things that I don't complain about as much publicly, but it's the customer service. Because sometimes I feel like I'm an expert. I get it. My questions are always going to be harder than someone who's just new to the platform. But sometimes I feel like they don't know what I'm talking about. And I'm like, it's your platform. You should know more than I do. And yet I don't get that vibe a lot of the time. So if what this person is saying carries over to Airtable, that they reinvest in really the customer experience, including customer support, that'll be a net positive.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So true. All right. Well, we spent 40 minutes on this acquisition. I didn't think we'd spend that long, but this obviously impacts everyone. And Lorraine says customer service disappeared from Airtable. Why we use consultants. Very true. That's why, as a consultant, it's been a good win for those on that side as well. So anyway, so let's move on. But we'd love to hear your feedback. Let us know here in the comments. Let us know what's your initial take. Are you on the pro side or the con side of the outlook for this? If you are looking elsewhere, let us know where you're looking and what your thoughts are. We'd love to hear, and we'll definitely be monitoring this over the coming months and see what happens. But yeah, in the meantime, there have been some new feature updates. So we'll kind of go through some of these real quickly. So we highlighted this before, ask Airtable questions directly from Slack. So this was a big upgrade to their Slack. So they've had a Slack integration for years, but they've now AI enabled their Slack integration.
So it's come in 3 phases. I think it started with just get notifications about Airtable into Slack, a typical Slack bot, and then a couple years ago, it was you could get actionable buttons straight from an Airtable automation, so you could update records from Slack into Airtable directly, and then this, which is a step beyond that even more. And they refer to it specifically as Omni. So some of the language, I think, is a little confusing about what this feature is, but they say Omni in if you read the support doc that comes with this announcement.
Yeah, I saw that. But that is not the case. So I tried to get this to work in my Slack. I was able to get it to integrate, but something was not configured. It might be because I had the old one before and I tried deleting it and reinstalling. I could get it to install. I could see the bot, but when I tag it, I couldn't get a response. So I'm still trying to get this working in my environment. But yeah, I'm almost positive that it's not the same as Omni. It's using the MCP, so it only exposes what the MCP client can expose.
Well, that's confusing.
Yeah,
because we talked about in the previous episode, Omni can do more than what the MCP can do. Right. So, I mean, there's only so much you could do from Slack anyway because of the nature of Slack, not really Airtable's fault. But yeah, I get that the language is a little confusing.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty sure based off of this, it's just what MCP can do. Yeah, I think they use Omni to just represent anything AI related, but that's confusing. Okay, so yeah, if we can get this working, we'll demo this in the future, but I don't think it's going to be anything different. Some concerns I had is like, does this expose everything? I think you actually lock it down to a single base is what I saw. So you can only connect a single base to communicate with.
I think each chat can only think about one base at a time. That's how I read it. Because you could give it a different base and it said it would lose all chat context.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. I have my own Slack instance as well, so I could try and test this in my own time and see if I can get it to work.
Maybe this was my problem. To see.
It does have a paragraph in somewhere in this article that's like it will only think about one base at a time, and then you have to say, "Oh, I'm talking about a different base,"
Yeah.
and then it
switch it.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that's definitely in here.
Yeah. The other concern I had was, okay, if I install this on Built on Air Slack community, then now anybody can communicate with what I expose that to. You got to be careful who has access to it.
Yeah, I feel like it should do the thing that OAuth connections do and not letting you if you do it for our whole Slack instance, which has over 1,000 members, not everyone has access to the base that we use to run the podcast on. So it should be able to pull your email address and know whether or not you have access to the base, but I don't know that.
I don't think it does because you have different emails for your Slack login versus your, unless you're on SSO. I don't think it does.
I find that disappointing. Yeah, because that could be very dangerous.
Or does anybody? I guess anybody could read if you're chatting with Airtable, but I wonder if each person have to OAuth authenticate to be able to chat with it, and then it knows your individual permissions.
I would like that. That feels more secure to me, and not sure if that's the case, but
I didn't think it was. I think I just configured it once as the admin. It's kind of scary. But anyway. All right, let's move on. A couple other things. So this is something Russ, as always, I think was the first to highlight this. Okay, so let's see. How long has formatting as a single select been around? Maybe a year? 2 years?
Couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of years. So this is with a formula field. If you could go into the formatting and you could format it as a single select, and then you'd have to define each item. Anyways, they've expanded that to where now you can format things as a URL or an email. So you could have different field. So that helps with how it displays things, and especially like URLs, that's helpful to be clickable and things like that.
And interfaces, most people use the Airtable user field or collaborator field or whatever it's called now. I think it's now called user. But you could also use an email field to control visibility settings. And if you had a formula that, if it's marketing, it's Jim's email, and if it's sales, it's Jane's email, that kind of thing, you couldn't use that formula for that visibility setting. So this adjustment, it's one of those little things that I just sort of consigned myself to deal with in Airtable. Because it's not that big of a problem in the grand scheme of building an application, but it resolves the need for some of these hacky little workarounds if you wanted to use things like conditional visibility.
Right.
We're already seeing the impact of the acquisition. This table has 3 records.
Airtable's been doing that for years, though. Sometimes it is a crapshoot with Airtable performance. I'll load a base that has 499,000 records, and it'll load like that. And then sometimes I'll load a base like this, and it'll take a full minute to load. There's no telling. It's a mystery.
Yeah.
I wonder also if the URL formatting, because I feel like if you didn't switch it to URL, it would still function as a URL.
Right.
You could still click on it. However, I think if you actually switch it to URL, I wonder if that gives you, similar to if you had it displayed as an email in interfaces, you could then use it as an image display how you could use the URL field to show an image in a gallery view now.
Yeah.
I don't know if I articulated that correctly, but
no, I mean, you're right. It's another instance of interfaces let you use certain fields for certain things, but formulas were oftentimes ineligible because they didn't output the expected type. So this is also a reminder to myself and other developers. Sometimes you have in your code only select this variable if the output is of type X, Y, and Z. And then there's extra configuration that you have to do to say, well, I want to accept single select fields, but also formulas formatted as a single select. If you did the same thing with URL or email, you're going to have to update your code to account for this now being a thing. I don't think this is going to have nearly the developer impact as the single select, which is a great feature. I'm not knocking that feature. I love it. I use it all the time. But man, did I have to go back and update a few things to be like, oh, well, I have to account for this new possibility.
Yeah. Yep. That is tricky. Yeah. The one that I rely heavily on is formatting as a checkbox.
All the time.
That it made so many like utility fields so much more readable, because I opened a very old base not recently, and it was a lot of ones and zeros, and it was a lot of math of like if equals 0, and I'm like, I wanted a Boolean, and technically yes, that's a Boolean, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I have a silly annoyance with the checkbox functionality here, or like when you're formatting the formula as a checkbox. Something I've noticed, and it probably won't happen on this table because you only have 3 records, but if you right click on the field and say filter by this field, filter by this field at the bottom there, it usually, you know how when you have enough records, or like, I don't know what the cutoff is to show the apply button.
1,000. Yeah.
Well, if you have more than 5,000 records, and then it will show you the first 1,000. A decision I find strange, but go ahead, Allie.
Well, either if you have that apply button there, I used to really dislike it, and now I rely on it heavily. And if you were to click on any other field that's not a checkbox and say filter by this field, it would open this up with the filter ready for you to play with, and then you hit apply. Then the changes take effect. That's not the case with this checkbox field. Just a word of warning. As soon as you right click, it will add to your filters and apply it at the same time. Like, it will, and it'll always say where it's unchecked. Like, it'll always add it being unchecked, and it will affect filters.
I like the apply feature. I think it's good practice, but yeah, the cutoff is opaque, and I think what I just said probably isn't even accurate. It might be a completely different threshold.
It isn't.
So it's like, I feel like if it were across the board, I think I would be fine with it. I would take some time to adjust. Or if it were like made very clear when that functionality happens, but I don't know why it wouldn't apply to a formula formatted as a checkbox. That feels like a miss.
Right. It's really strange. And it does, if you open up the filter and add it manually, it waits for you to hit apply. But if you right click on the field and say filter by this field, it applies it immediately.
If the buttons are
yeah. So we would need to demonstrate this on a much larger table.
Bigger, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's hard to say without actually being able to show it. I was just trying to see if I had one at hand, but I don't. Other big annoyance while I'm on the thing is if you are in that table and you click on the test output test, like one of those cells in the text field to the left, like where it says Dane Fellwood.
Okay.
Yeah. And then expand that with the little arrows. And now try an arrow down Nothing.
Yeah, I think this used to work.
It did.
And now it
yeah.
So here it works, but
all the time. If you expand it, you can no longer arrow around, and you used to be able to. And I, again, relied on that heavily, and now it's gone, and I'm like freaking out.
Yeah, that is that's an accessibility feature. So, a lot of my complaints are petty annoyances, but that's not cool. Some people can only navigate basically using the keyboard and not so much the mouse. So, yeah, I don't know about that.
Interesting.
Driving me crazy. Like I used to if you have for my use case is typically if I have two long text fields, I'm trying to compare the values of them. I'll arrow between them because if it's too big to see the whole thing, I can't see it unless I expand it. And so then I can arrow back and forth. But
yeah. All right. Getting to the end here. Okay, yeah. So this one, and Gary mentions that you can do it on the roll up as well. So that's good. Yeah.
I was going to add. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, when are we going to get roll-ups equivalent of single select? I assume it would become multi-select or single select, because sometimes you could get a single text value. So it should allow you to do both. But
yeah, that's true. You can't.
What I would really like is, I mean, what could maybe solve for what I'm looking for there is just to be able to only include unique values in a lookup field. Just a toggle, only show me the unique single select values.
Now, someone might say, Allie, why don't you just use a roll-up? And you would say,
I want the colors and I want the selection drop down from the filters. I don't want to lose my look and feel of my single select.
So for me, I feel that way, but especially about lookups of linked record fields, because if you're in an interface, you could turn that lookup of a linked record into a visualization. That's great. But if you don't want to do that, you see those duplicates and,
you can do if all of them are the same value, you can get the limit to just get the first one.
Yes. And I've used that, but sometimes it's a mix, and I want to consolidate. I don't want them all repeating, and roll-ups figured it out. So that's the deal. Look up.
That first and last option, something to note that's important there that I figured out somewhat recently is if you don't filter it to only show the values that are not empty, it will give you, if the first value is empty, it will just give you an empty value.
Yep. So, you have to filter it.
I almost exclusively use array compact and array unique if I'm in a roll-up, and then I will use slice. But yeah, that's a good tip.
Yeah, I usually do the filter and only return ones that have a value. Yeah.
I've got a good hack also along the getting a unique value from the lookups of a single select. If you sync it to a different table, that'll give you just the unique values, a different base.
All right, we're coming up on the limit, and I do have a hard stop here. So we'll highlight a couple other. So we talked about previously the MCP additions for automations, and then Camille calls out a couple other ones that aren't often mentioned: revert action and submit form.
Yeah, those are two that I wouldn't even considered being added either to the API or the MCP, but they are great additions. So happy to see them.
Yeah. Let's maybe next week's episode we could get to our MCP, and then I think that would be cool to showcase these. There's one other one that maybe we'll save for next week. So maybe next week's show we'll dive into some of these tidbits that we've been talking about. So anyways, let us know your feedback on today's big news. And hopefully the initial scare wears away. I think in the end, everything will be okay. And we'll be just fine figuring this out together. Have a good week.